Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining the call today. Apologies for the technical issues that we had last week when we tried to run this webinar. Hopefully today we won't encounter anything similar. Hope we can get through the presentation with no hiccups. My name's Andrew Spicer, Managing Director for Realtech, and I'm grateful and privileged to be joined today by the excellent team at EPI. This session is an overview of solutions to help you with your data management, how you can potentially scramble, test data, efficient system copy, and much more. After this session, we can arrange any individual one-to-one sessions to cover any areas of specific interest. And the chat Q&A, which you should find at the top of your screen, should be available for you to ask any questions, and we will answer as many of these as possible at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce and hand over this session firstly to Luke from EPI. Luke, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to this EPI Labs presentation on the Data Sync Manager Suite and Archive Central. As Andrew mentioned, my name's Luke. I'm an account executive and partner alliance manager with EPI Labs. With me, I have Daniel Parker. Daniel is the EPI Labs solution delivery lead and has worked in the SAP space for over 20 years. He's a tried and true solutions legend with colleagues and peers alike. Before we get stuck into the solutions, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce EPI Labs and what we do to contribute to the success of nearly 1,000 organisations worldwide. I'll then hand the reins directly over to Daniel to begin the demonstration. Now, as Andrew indicated, if you have any questions, please direct them to the Q&A tab up the top. We'll address as many of these as possible towards the end of the session. EPI Labs, who are they? What are they? We're a group of passionate professionals with a simple drive. That drive is to maximise the performance, the security and management of your SAP systems, helping you and your business make faster and more accurate business decisions. Our software, value-added solutions and managed services create better, more powerful and more secure SAP systems, saving significant time, money and resources, which is what we're all kind of looking towards. Over the course of Labs inception, over 35 years ago, we've had some of the most brilliant minds in the SAP arena contribute to the ongoing success of our solutions, allowing us to boast a highly impressive 97% client renewal rate. We've been world leaders in this space for a long time, and we're going to continue to be so with our commitment of 23% of our yearly revenue being invested directly back into research and development. Our global footprint has us physically placed in close to 50 countries worldwide, with contacts and partners covering an even further span. EPI Labs is a brand of Group Elephant. Group Elephant is an employee-owned group of companies and non-profits with a strong global presence. The group is characterised by a primary strategic imperative in terms of which it goes beyond corporate purpose in its day-to-day activities. In this measure, our projects are carefully selected based upon their potential for preservation and protection of threatened elephants and rhinos, and for the creation of powerful economic engines that can alleviate poverty among rural people. In order for this to succeed, all businesses of Group Elephant commit 1% of all revenue to this cause. Now, I absolutely love this initiative and I could rant about it for quite some time, but I am more than conscious of our time together today. So I'll invite any who are interested in learning a little bit more about our Beyond Corporate Purpose projects to contact me for more information. Now, obviously, we have a pictograph up here, value through innovation. I've already touched on some of what's depicted here, but I'd like to bring your attention to Client Central, our collaborative community with online portals in which all clients have access to for ongoing support. The solution is one thing, significant investments into R&D is another, but the ongoing exemplary support and service is just another reason why we're able to claim a 97% renewal rate. You'll always have someone there if assistance is required. Now, I feel I've gas bagged a bit. I think it's probably Dan's turn to take the mic, and I can sense he's eager to get stuck into it. So I'll hand the mic over to you, Daniel.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke, and thanks, Andrew. So as Luke mentioned, I look after solution and service delivery in the region for EPI Labs. And today what we'll be talking about is some of our SAP test data management solutions, and also a legacy data archiving solution. So I'll take you through on a high level what those products are about and how they can be applied and how they can help you in managing your SAP landscapes. Key point there, and you'll see through the slides, is the certification. So everything we're talking about today is SAP certified and running on latest versions of S4HANA. And the products work across things like ERP, S4, CRM, SRM, BW, APO, and SCM. So all the typical parts of a typical large and modern SAP landscape. So let's jump into it. So why do organizations struggle to get good test data? So this is one of the questions that sort of drives the solution suite data sync manager that I'll be talking on today. And the typical challenges that people struggle with, and the things that we have built the product around to try and alleviate are these kind of items here. So just the refresh process, standing up a copy of production as QA, minimizing disk space across your landscape. So if you've got large production systems, making copies of those starts to chew into lots of sand space and cost in non-production. Having efficient ways to stand up new dev systems or create lean test environments. Just the time and drag on basis resources, potential downtime of systems when trying to replace data. Sensitive data, so personally identifiable information, sensitive information, challenges around anonymizing that or removing that. So these are some of the core areas that we build the product set to help alleviate challenges of. Key components of the Data Sync Manager suite work to the data model of the SAP system. So that little picture on the left is a very basic representation of an SAP system. The dark blue is transactional data, the light blue is master data, the red is configuration, and these make up the client of the system that you may log into to do work and run your business. And then below that is the grey plinth, which is the repository or cross-client information. So different parts of Data Sync Manager work with different parts of that data model to alleviate the challenges we saw on the previous page. So first up is Object Sync. So this is an on-demand component, so it allows a test team or a functional team to move small sections of data from a production system to another system. So maybe refresh employees, refresh business partners into an existing system. The second component is what we call Client Sync. So this is where a technical team, like a basis team, would replace your current system refresh process with a reduced and cut down client copy. So it alleviates a lot of the challenges they have around a standard refresh, reduces the size of the copy, and gives you a lot of flexibility. The third component is Data Secure, so the scrambling engine. So as we move data or on an existing already built system, we can apply scrambling and anonymization. So we'll talk a bit about Data Secure later on. And the last component again is the technical part of the tool set. So this is where we can create a new system shell or align or sync a shell in more modern S4HANA versions. And again, this is where a basis team or a technical team may add a small system to the landscape, then put data into it with Client Sync, or maybe help with a cloud migration or a cloud move. So we won't go into too much detail on that one today. We'll just focus around the more common components, Object Sync, Client Sync, and Data Secure. So let's talk about a couple of typical challenges where we help organizations. So one quite often is disk space and disk cost. So typical scenario where we help is just reducing the size of a test system. So with Data Sync Manager, we can help create more lean test systems or much leaner development systems. So a reduction of 80% can be quite common of the target system. And the idea is that you still have a working valid data set. So you've got all your master data and a good selection of transactional data, which allows you to work and continue forward for testing needs. A good example here is Hunken Moller, a European customer. So they have about a 1.3 terabyte production system. And with Client Sync, we can take client-dependent customizing, client-dependent master data, and a subset of transactional data, what we call a 6-month transactional time slice. So that's a consistent slice of reduced data. around 330 gigabytes. So it's coming down to 24% of their starting size. So with ClientSync, they get workable test data in a much more reduced system, cutting down on storage costs, cutting down on growth of non-production systems. And a lot of organizations then may use this as an opportunity to have additional systems. So it's not, it's prohibitive to have 2 or 3 1.3 terabyte systems, but it's manageable to have a couple of 300, 400 gigabyte systems, which perform the same purpose. If we apply that concept as well to something like HANA databases, HANA infrastructure, and a potential S4HANA move, what you may be paying now in terms of a traditional database, so a SQL Server or an Oracle or a Database or something like that, when you convert to S4HANA, the nature of the technology and the nature of the hardware is going to increase the running cost. So that's what we typically see occurring. Then, of course, oops, went too quick. Of course, if we can apply a reduction in size with ClientSync, we're going to help maintain that cost and cut down the cost of moving to a HANA appliance and HANA hardware. So it's fairly common for us to work with customers. They may have a 1 to 2 terabyte S4HANA system, and then we're helping them build test systems on appliances, half or a third that size. So that greatly reduces their running cost for the non-production landscape compared to production size systems. Another example of success story here, so an oil and gas company. So from here, you can see the way we support different database types and different system types. So this is ClientSync being used across an ERP system, a CRM system, and a BW. And we're seeing 80% or 50% reduction across each of those. So the same solution set supports different SAP data models and different underlying database types, creating good space savings and easier refresh processes for that customer. Another key challenge where we help people is effectiveness of testing. So testing is often very much based around the data you have that you can test on. So a typical issue for our customers is they're simply testing on old systems or out-of-date data. So you might create new configuration, a new initiative, you build that development, you test it either on very old data or maybe manufactured data, everything looks okay, and then you continue up the landscape, same situation. You haven't refreshed systems often, you are having to create data to support the new initiative or new configuration, so things look okay, but when you move to production and you hit real production data, you may not actually have configured things or built things correctly. So in terms of effectiveness, if we can provide lean refreshers and easy access to data elsewhere in the landscape, when you start developing and building that change in development, you're working on real production hardware. So you've got much more confidence that your change is going to work when it gets to production, so forth for QA, so forth for pre-prod, and when you get to prod, you've already done extensive testing on prod-like data. So the benefit there is less rework, less transport churn, the ability for teams to execute testing often quicker because they're not having to make data sets or perform full refreshes before they can start particular testing cycles. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at DataSync Manager in practice in terms of the concepts of how it works. So it's a test data and scrambling solution, as we've sort of talked to. Helps you reduce systems, create lean, fit-for-purpose clients for particular testing scenarios. So you may have a very small time slice in development, maybe something like a 1-month transactional time slice. Gives you a unit testing environment without a lot of data overhead. You can even build HR specific clients. So we may build a client which is just for a HR payroll processing team, and then we can easily top up data into that around payroll results, and keep that lean to purpose rather than having full copies of systems. And there's a lot of smarts in there to reduce the workload of creating that data and bringing that in. Options to scramble data, options to scramble more because of the way we built the solution. And as we spoke about, we can generally see it increasing the speed of testing processes. And as mentioned before, certified for use in typical SAP systems and scenarios. So a typical landscape, we might have ERP, CRM, and BW. And generally, we're deploying DataSync Manager across these, and we can use the solution to keep each of those types of systems aligned. So if I want to perform a refresh or a data copy process, I can extract data from the production system of the ERP, CRM, and BW and bring it back into the dev or the QA or the pre-prod of each of those landscapes. So we can support each of those. We work with each of the data models. We can do alignment of the copy of data across each and alignment of scrambling of the data across each, depending on the scenario that we're making use of. We also have support for newer things such as success factors. So if you're an organization running payroll, whether that's on-premise or maybe you've moved to SAP's ECP, we have a success factors connector for Employee Central data. So you can optionally copy the main employee record in your S4 or ECC system, and it's linked Employee Central user data in success factors. So we can copy that data as a consistent data set, apply data scrambling to it, or scramble data in a target with DataSync Manager. So that's one of the newer areas and newer features. So leveraging bringing related success factors data. Let's dig in a little bit more to the product types. So first of all, we'll have a look at Object Sync and then at Client Sync. So we would like to talk about two approaches to the test data management challenge here. So Object Sync is the on-demand engine, and Client Sync is the landscape-driven or the larger copy engine. So these give us two different opportunities in terms of how you may want to approach or manage refresh. So first of all, we'll have a look at Object Sync on the data on demand. So this is a way you can get small subsets of data back into a QA system or a dev system. Lets you do sort of things closer to real time. So maybe bring back particular bits of master data or maybe a problem transaction or sales order to a test system to let people do reproduce a production issue. And go forth. You can create copies of data for testing or training, bring back different parts and different modules. So one of the most common areas this is used is around employee data, but it's also very common as well out to things like master data, so materials, business partners, customers, vendors, pricing conditions, those kind of areas. So this is putting the ability to move data back in the hands of functional teams or testing teams or developers, so they're not always dependent on a full refresh by a basis team. So what is it all about? It's about copying a small subset of data from production into a target system. So we're going to take an employee record, all its related data, and put it into an existing system, or maybe a business partner, maybe a sales document, and so forth. So how do we achieve that? So within DataSync Manager, we've mapped out and modeled table structures. So we know what the tables related to customer, business partner, even the BW customer item. And with Object Sync, we can extract just the related table records for that item. And I can even optionally do that across systems. So I might take the customer from ERP, its related business partner in CRM, and then potentially the BW if you've got that, and then move that data back into each of the target systems. So I'm just putting a single customer record or business partner back to that target. But the underlying thing that makes all this work is the business object definitions and the table mappings of the underlying structures for those data objects. The benefits here, you touched on a few of these, your training environments, testing developments and configuration back into a dev system or back into a QA system without needing to potentially refresh the whole system, getting production support issues, so quickly bring back something that might be a current issue in prod. Parallel pay run testing is another big one. Bring back last week's pay results and employees, and do a trial pay before next week's pay on real data. And we can also do things around support packs and upgrade testing. So you can take data from a lower release system with Object Sync and put it into a higher release, which is unique amongst the different parts of the products, but it allows us to take something from an unupgraded system, put it into an upgrade system. So we've used this with customers during S/4HANA conversions, taken their latest employees and payroll results from an Enhancement Pack 8 system, put it into an S4 2020 system, which was the QA system, and then they could do parallel pay run testing, then move forward with the production S4 conversion. So there's some of the typical types of benefits. And as mentioned, there's success factors add-on. So if you're running Employee Central or on ECP with Employee Central, there is capability to support that data model that's split between SF and the main ABAP data. And it's certified for use per SAP's note, which whitelists particular products that can run in that success factors or ECP scenario. All right, so that's Object Sync, so a way of picking subsets of data, maybe in between larger refreshes, giving people the ability to top up, add things for particular needs, less reliance then on a technical team or an infrastructure team to drive refreshes. On the other side, what we offer that infrastructure team or that technical team is the landscape-driven sync, which we call client sync. So this is essentially high-performance client copying. So it's going to allow us to reduce the size of a client, run much quicker than standard client copy, and also reduce and remove a vast amount of the manual work and the post-processing, generally making it much more efficient than doing a full system refresh. We've got smarts in there around document flows and transactional integrity, so we can slice the data by time, but keep it keep the integrity by following document flows to build a working system. And we can also extend this out as well to particular split and merger type projects or enterprise slicing. So sometimes you may be divesting or carving out a business unit. We can use this product to carve out particular company codes or particular structures to build new systems. But its general usage is around standard test system refresh. So what's that look like? Again, so like that Hunker Moller example, we're using client sync to extract client dependent configuration, client dependent master data, and a subset of transactional data. Then we can apply that into a target system, either into a new client or into an existing client to create a reduced refresh. And if we have a look at that in action, so the time slice is the important bit. So we may say take 6 months or 3 months. So that's from the start time of the sync back a period of time. And we analyze that data for related or linked information. So we can bring across data outside of the main time slice and link that into the sync. So we now have a consistent data set, and then that goes to the target along with the master data and configuration, giving us a consistent working target client. You can apply that same concept as well to an enterprise slice or a company code slice. So this time we're picking the structure, so starting from a company code, getting the related plants, business areas and so forth, but again applying related document flows to that and bringing it in and then copying across to the target. So we have configuration, master data subsetted just to the related company code, and then transactional data subsetted to the time slice and the company code, building a much leaner target system if needed. Okay, so they're the two main components: on-demand, object sync, and landscape-driven client sync for technical teams. So key benefit, reducing the size of space required in production systems. We can cut production support costs and time to replicate a production support issue. We can also apply scrambling as part of those copies, but we'll talk about scrambling in a moment. Just generally lowers the risks and costs associated with support because it's more of a known quantity doing a refresh and less time consuming. Cuts time the team spend doing things, cuts the post-processing effort, and just keeps things easier and a little bit neater for technical teams, essentially. Okay, so there were the two data copy components. What we'll have a look now is the scrambling component. So we've had a look at object sync, client sync. Let's have a look at data secure. So it's all fine to copy the data about and move it about, but it's very common these days and more common to want to deal with personally identifiable information outside of production. So this is where data secure can help us alleviate that problem. So it's our test data anonymization and test data scrambling solution. So we either run it as part of the object sync or client sync just spoken on, or we scramble data in place in an existing system. So we deliver a whole bunch of out-of-the-box content which maps common PII locations within SAP. And then that usually forms the basis of an implementation that we'll talk about in a moment. So then we expand that out or minimize that and customize it based on what's actually in your system and what needs to be done. Yeah, you can scramble subsets of data or an entire system or scramble as part of the data copy. And as you can see, they're certified as well because it's part of the same solution set and certified for use on S/4HANA and the like. Okay, so what's it mean? Once again, it's about the business object definitions, table mappings, how we've defined things. But when it comes to scrambling, we add an extra component, which we call an integrity map. So not only do we know what a customer or business partner is, but we know how all the things are linked. So the name for the customer and business partner, how is it linked within the one system and linked across others? So when I'm preparing to apply scrambling, I know the tables and fields across each of those systems, and I do a calculation process. So I determine what the new name is going to be. And then as I move the data, I apply that scrambling. So the calculation is simply determining in memory what we're going to do, optionally saving that for later reuse. And then in the target system, we're applying the new values as we write the data in. So it's scrambled when it leaves the production system. And if we wish, we can reuse calculation values and apply the same scrambling in both Dev and QA. Otherwise, you'll recalculate each time and you'll get different values in different systems. But of course, we're not actually touching the real data, so the original values stay as are. Then we've applied aligned scrambling to the different data objects in the target. So the real question though with a solution like this, I mean, it's fine to be able to identify standard fields and then apply scrambling in an aligned manner. But the question is, where is all the PII in your system? How much do you have? So if you think about standard kind of SAP data model, some of the very common areas where people run, where people store PII, employee is a very obvious one. Vendor, so you might have bank account details. Vendors as a person, you could have address and names of a vendor. The business partner, more and more important in S/4HANA. So joining the two together, so that's going to have, if they're a person, it's going to have names, maybe bank accounts, contact details, and customer as well, hanging off the business partner. So same again, if that's an individual, you could have things that are identifiable, even if these are businesses. The vendor is a business, the customer is the business. You know, they may have bank account details or VAT or GST or BAT type numbers that you don't want to expose in a test system. So these are common areas. And underneath that, of course, there's a large variety of standard tables and standard fields. So even just starting from those 3 or 4 common areas, we can spiral out very quickly to a large number of tables and a large number of fields where PII exists, and the relationship between them can get very complex. So it's all linked, it's all related. If I want to update employee name, that is most likely linked to a business partner, could have a customer, could have a vendor, definitely has address table details. So that one simple change against a HR info type, we then need to flow to a variety of areas to keep the data consistent and keep it lined up. Otherwise, your test data potentially turns into a little bit of spaghetti. So the key values are the same, the employee number is the same, but you might not have the name aligned across those areas. So this is a key part of data secure, making sure we have table mappings and table understanding underneath, and integrity maps which link these things together to keep the alignment consistent when we apply scrambling. Another key point is locating and finding all of that is difficult. So as mentioned, we have a lot of pre-delivered content, but the real question is, where are you storing PII in standard tables, as well as what custom or maybe third-party vendor tables do you have in your system where there may be data? So typically we run some data discovery and technical workshops to help build out a scrambling scope. What that looks like is running a small program, analysis program in your system. So this automatically scans the data dictionary, looking for likely tables and fields where you could be storing data. And we combine that with row counts and record counts for fields. So there's no identifiable information, but that helps us build out the picture of where the data is. And then we work through workshops to then discuss what things are important to you and what aren't, and build a summary of what's required. And then that can be used as the input to an implementation if you want to take it further. So the work around this is typically up to a week, a day or two of workshops, a few days of analysis, and then preparing the output report. So the reason we take this approach is because the scrambling can be complex, especially if you might be dealing with a couple of different jurisdictions. So maybe it's a New Zealand-based system, but you've got customer data from different areas of the world. So you may need to think about different ways you manage that, whether that's just as test data, maybe in production, and so forth. But the output becomes the basis that we can feed into a data secure implementation, if that is where you wish to go. At the same time, it gives you a good understanding of what type of data you have that's a PII and where the volumes are. So that can be useful from a sort of business risk or an understanding of how to approach it in terms of your roadmap and future plans. Okay, so once we have that kind of picture, underlying where we take that is what we call our SAP Data Privacy Suite. So I've basically been talking about data secure, which is the test data masking. So in the test system, we can anonymize that information, but we also do have a suite of products for production data and management of production information. So this is more important since GDPR out of Europe. So where there is a requirement to reduce or remove or anonymize data in production that you no longer have the right or have the need to keep. So data disclose, data redact, and data retain are three ways that we can apply removal or redaction of data from production. So a really good example of this is a German online retailer, a web retailer. They had around 200 to 300,000 one-time vendor records. So these are web store checkouts as a one-time vendor, as a guest checkout, where someone has purchased something. So they know that person's name, they know their address, and they've got bank details for them. But they're a guest checkout. They're never really going to be a returning customer. So they're not a customer record, so to speak. So we help them with disclose and redact to locate the records that they would then redact. So redact means changing the name, changing the bank account of the record in production. So from a GDPR point of view, they no longer hold that data, but they haven't impacted or affected their financial side. So it's still a one-time purchase record. It's still got all the same financial information against it. They just don't know who it is or where they live anymore. So that was a way they could reduce that risk. So, you know, this depends on what's happening in your region, your laws, your legislation. But the point is we've built a product set to help with those more modern kinds of legislative and data redaction type needs. All right, so that was a talk through test data management. So we talked about you know, helping solve challenges with test data, test system refresh, and management of data in test systems. So we looked at Object Sync, which is the on-demand copy. We had a little bit of a look at Client Sync, which is what your basis teams might use to replace your standard SAP refresh. Then we talked a bit about data secure and how we can anonymize data, how we can do workshops to help find your PII and understand the impact of taking on a scrambling workshop and a scrambling process. So they're sort of the key building blocks of test data management. What I just wanted to have a look at next is legacy data archiving. So this is just a little bit of a different direction. So we have an archiving solution, which we'll have a look at now. So Archive Central. And Archive Central is about sunsetting data or sunsetting applications while retaining secure access to that data. So the typical business drivers for this is maybe you're retiring some legacy systems. You're looking to right-size an ERP system. So maybe you're planning a ECC6 to S/4HANA move, but you want to start S/4HANA differently or leaner, or maybe even go greenfields. So what do you do with that legacy system? If you're looking for ways to remove that data and retire the licensing and running costs of the ERP system or other legacy systems, this is the solution to help out in that scenario. And the other one is divestment. So you've carved out a business unit, or maybe you've inherited a business unit as part of a merger, but you don't necessarily want to run the data you were given in a system you were given. Maybe you'll implement them new on your own ERP, and then you've got a legacy system or legacy data from that merger and take on. So it's all about giving you ways to take data from an existing system, put it in a modern web-based SaaS type solution with secure access or modern technologies, and then retire that old system so you're not having to maintain and run it. Some of the key points. So it's simple to move the data in, so we can bring things in as flat files. We simply just define the structure of the data into what we call a collection, and it goes in. There's simple role-based access, so you can manage who can access what subsets of data they can see, and there's a very easy auditability and audit trail. And you can even secure data. So back to that PII type discussion, you know, the data is secured, stored securely, backups, look at disaster recovery, everything's included, but we can anonymize and close off some fields if needed from a data security point of view. So not everything is visible to everyone. And then just in terms of look and feel, as I said, web-based. What we can do is we can control and manage the screens. So here it's just the users and activities. So you show you the audit trail and role management, simple dashboards, simple reporting if you want to do some review of data. But the data goes into what's called a collection. We can build search indexes as well. And we can even define the screens and look and feel. So something we've been helping a Melbourne-based customer with is combining about 4 different legacy payroll sets into Archive Central, because they've implemented fresh payroll on SAP ECP with success factors. So they've got a range of old legacy systems and brought them all into different collections and made it visible in Archive Central. And then you can arrange the screens to make it look a bit like the legacy system. So from the payroll team's point of view, as they come in to look at legacy data, it looks a little bit like their previous system. So the barrier of entry to find the data and look at things is a little bit simpler. And we've been helping customers as well archive or remove old SAP data, and we can lay the screens out to look like PA20 and so forth, or PA01, those kind of things. So that's Archive Central. So if you are looking, you've got legacy systems you want to turn off or decommission, call out, or maybe you're planning a carve out or a cut down or reduction, and you're looking for a way to not have to run a legacy system, or maybe thinking about greenfields or a hybrid start to S/4HANA and wondering what to do with the legacy data. That's another area where it can help. Okay, last little point here is one of our readiness reports. So underlying, excuse me, so underpinning having a detailed conversation about something like Data Sync Manager or the Scrambling or Archive Central is what we call our analysis reports or readiness reports. So what you see here is a Data Sync Manager readiness report. It's something we can help to analyze your landscape and understand what's in the system and how we would support it. So simple transport goes into whatever type of system you're interested in, whether that's S4, ERP, SRM, CRM, BW, SCM, so forth. It pulls out just basically table structures, row counts, that kind of information. There's no business data, no personally identifiable information. And what it gives us is an understanding of how object sync could work, client sync could work, whether Archive Central is appropriate or what data areas, what a data scrambling approach might look like. So it's a lead into those bigger data scrambling and analysis workshops and reviews. So if you are interested, you want to learn a bit more about how we might approach your systems with any of these products, please just reach out to Andrew and the team, and they can help out with details on how to run one of these readiness reports and readiness assessments. And then we basically take you through it. It's available for you to view, and we point out what's important or what's useful from a test data management perspective. Okay, so that was what I wanted to cover through today. So I'll wind down now, and we'll open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Dan. I can see we've got a couple of questions. Just before we get into those, I had a couple which I thought perhaps we'd just kick off with. So just going back to the Data Sync Manager, and just to sort of clarify, how does that cope with custom tables? Because that's obviously fairly common in systems.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Client Sync has what we call a catch-all approach. So any custom tables with Client Sync will simply be included. So we copy all the records, and then you would just configure or change the solution to reduce the volume of data if you wish to. For Object Sync, which was the on-demand copy, we would need to extend it. So for argument's sake, you've got a sales, Z sales order table, which has extra line item information for each sales order. We could link that table to our sales order copy object, and then when you ran a sales order sync with Object Sync, you would get the related records from that table. So yeah, it's either catch-all with Client Sync or simple customization with Object Sync, which would be part of any implementation.
Thank you for that. The other one that was of interest to me that was just in terms of as you're taking the data and you're either masking it or scrambling it, is that done as part of the transfer, or is it copied somewhere first and then something is dealt with?
So if we're scrambling the data when we're doing a client refresh or an object copy, we're applying that as part of the copy. So as we extract the data, as we read it into memory, we apply the scrambling and then we pass it to the target system or to file. So we're not building a staging table, then scrambling, then extracting. It's all happening as part of the process.
Yep. That's what I was sort of expecting. Obviously, trying to keep things secure, so you wouldn't want to replicate data that you're trying to secure. Luke, Have you been looking at the Q&A?
I do have one question up that has come through. With Object Sync, how long does it take to copy into the other client?
Yeah, so Object Sync is moving small amounts of data. So if you think about something like maybe one employee record with all its associated payroll results, that could be a 1 minute copy from production to non-production. So it can be very quick. But at the same time, you can copy large amounts of data. So one of the team helped a Queensland healthcare company last week, I think, to refresh about 30,000 employees with Object Sync. So that was about a 2-day exercise where I think it was about 4 or 5 hours to extract all of that data from their production system, and then the next day they would load it into the dev system. So if you're moving small amounts of data very quick, but at the same time it can be used to move larger volumes if you require. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
And one that I know does come up on a regular basis, and I may as well just ask it as if I'm the one interested right now. But does DataSync Manager work on HANA and S4?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Yep. So HANA databases are very common for us. I think probably the vast majority of new implementations for us are on a HANA database. If you look at our customer base, HANA might be 20 to 30% of the database type, because we've got customers from 10, 15 years back who haven't moved there yet. And S4HANA is supported as well. So we're certified for using S4HANA, and we're running client sync, object sync, data secure for S4HANA customers all the way up to S4 2020. I'm sure we've got an S4 2021, but yeah, I just can't think of one off the top of my head at the moment. But yeah, S4HANA definitely, and HANA as well for things like BW or ERP on HANA. That's very common. Yeah.
Just to extend that question slightly, there's a number of customers who are still on ECC, which may be Oracle or variety of different databases underpinning it, including HANA. But this would work across ECC on whatever database, and so an organization could start to utilize the tools now with ECC and continue to utilize them post any move to S4 in the future.
Yeah, definitely correct. Yeah, and there's a lot of advantages as well for this kind of tool set around something like a suite on HANA move or an S4HANA project. So it makes it a lot easier to build out a test landscape that you then use as you work through your S4HANA conversion and so forth. But yeah, that's very common as well, to help people embed it, and then they use it as part of their S4 transition or a cloud transition, and continue to use it in that new landscape. Yeah.
And get some good archiving going in the meantime to tidy up the system before they start doing a migration.
Correct.
I'm conscious of the time, and I'm very appreciative of everybody's time and your efforts in the presentation today. Just before we close, are there any final questions from anybody that's on the participant side? If there are, please add them to the Q&A, which you'll find at the top of the screen. Just give you a moment.
Might ask one other one, Daniel.
Sure.
How flexible or customizable is data security in creating different scrambling rules?
Yes, very flexible. So I think I mentioned we deliver a whole pile of standard content. So for typical PII areas, so customer bank, business partner bank, names, addresses, and so forth. But all of that content can be copied and customized. So if you've got Z tables or Z fields, we can simply copy that stuff and adjust it, or we can build from the ground up. So we can create custom objects, integrity maps, and rules, which are the building blocks of the scrambling solution. So easily done, which is a big part of one of those analysis workshops as well, to help pick out where you have differences from the standard setups.
Thanks, Dan.
Oh, I see there's a question there on how the products are licensed. I don't. Do you want to chat to that one, Luke, or I can have a talk?
Certainly. We're more than happy to work around any prospective client with what's preferable in their eyes. Obviously, we can do a subscription-based sort of licensing. We can do a perpetual-based licensing. At times, obviously, it's dependent on what the actual purpose is, whether it's for a specific project. That's needless to say, where a subscription might be more suitable. However, we find that DataSync Manager is most certainly, and obviously Archive Central as well, is certainly a solution that is good in the long term as well. So more regularly and often than not, we find that a perpetual license is the way to go. That being said, if you are a little bit more interested in this, I think it's better to have a discussion one-on-one. So please feel free to reach out to Andrew and the team, and we can most certainly delve into that a little bit further.
And you can license the different modules and components individually. So if you're only interested in Scrambling Engine, you can just license Data Secure. If you're only interested in Client Copy, then you could just license Client Sync. So there's lots of flexibility. And it's common as well sometimes for customers to maybe start with their key needs. So their initial need might be making their refresh process better. So they might buy Client Sync. And then in 6 months, they say, okay, now I need to scramble. And another 6 months, okay, now I want to top up data. So it's flexible in that manner as well.
And also to add to that, we can also do these projects as a service as well. Obviously, that would go through the Realtech team.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions coming in just yet. If you have any questions after the session wraps up, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll get back to you as quickly as possible. That we can arrange follow-up sessions to go into more detail specific to your requirements, your environment, and what your interest is, and we can organise that as soon as possible. Just like to finish with thanking Daniel for all of the presentation, and Luke for the assistance with answering the questions and managing the call as well. With that, I will wrap up the call and thank everybody that's joined. Thank you very much for joining and for your time. And again, for your patience, and apologies for the technical issues of last week. I'm glad that this week all worked as expected. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.